I am 76 years old and have been living on my own for more than a decade. When I was young, the issue of elder care always seemed so distant. I always assumed that day would never come. Even when I caught a glimpse of it, I simply thought it was something to consider far in the future. However, as I have grown older and my health has gradually declined, the once casually dismissed problem of aging has become an unavoidable reality. I used to hear people say there were only a few options for old age: relying on one's children, moving into a nursing home, or hiring a caregiver. Yet each of these choices carries its own drawbacks. For someone like me who has no children and limited finances, none of these options seem acceptable. Moving into a nursing home would mean giving up the independence I've cherished for so long, and the cost of hiring a caregiver is prohibitively high, far beyond what I can afford. Just when I was fretting over my future, an unexpected experience completely changed my perspective and revealed a new way to remain independent while having someone there to care for me. Reflecting on the past, my marriage with my ex-husband was always filled with conflict and arguments. Before we married, we were deeply in love, sharing many sweet and tender moments. However, it wasn't long after our wedding that problems began to surface. The most painful discovery was that I was unable to bear children, a secret that had long been a hidden burden in my heart. At first, I was unaware of my own condition. The sweet words exchanged on our wedding day had made me overlook everything. But as time passed, the problem gradually came to light. My husband's initially passionate and caring attitude shifted. He was no longer the gentle, considerate man I once knew, but became irritable and critical, often venting his frustrations on me. He would constantly complain that I had prevented him from continuing the family line, and he even nitpicked on the smallest daily matters. Sometimes, in a fit of anger, he would even resort to physical violence. Those days were filled with ceaseless quarrels and intense strife, making every day feel like living on a battlefield and leaving me emotionally and physically exhausted. Although I longed to get a divorce, my parents vehemently opposed it. They insisted that since I was unable to bear children, no one would ever want to take on a problematic woman like me if I separated. Under the weight of my parents' insistence and constant pressure, I was forced to endure the marriage, harboring countless grievances and disappointments in my heart. 15 years ago, fate finally gave me a break. My ex-husband passed away suddenly from cancer. Perhaps because the years of conflict had dulled my feelings, I felt more relief than sorrow at his departure. I continued to live on my own. Although I occasionally felt loneliness, it was far better than the relentless arguments and indifference of the past. At that time, I believed that I could manage life alone. A cup of tea in the morning, some television, and a few simple chores at home were enough to keep me content. However, as I grew older, I began to notice the gradual decline of my physical strength. Until I was 75, I could easily go to the market, cook my own meals, and do the laundry. But once I passed that age, tasks I once took for granted became incredibly challenging. I no longer walked as briskly as I did in my youth. Even buying groceries now required several stops to catch my breath. This stark realization made me understand that someday I would not be able to take care of myself on my own. I seriously examined various elder care options. Traditionally, most elderly people are expected to rely on their children, which seems ideal, but that option simply does not exist for me, as I have neither biological children nor relatives to depend on. Another option is moving into a nursing home, where professional care is available, yet I always felt that doing so would cost me the freedom and lifestyle I had maintained for years. After all, nursing homes come with strict routines and rules that I could never adapt to. As for hiring a caregiver, I've heard that the minimum monthly salary for one is around $4,000. And if you need round-the-clock care, the cost can exceed $6,000. Imagine having only an $8,000 monthly pension. There is simply no way to afford such high expenses. Even with some savings, those funds would only last 3 to 5 years when combined with everyday costs like utilities, food, and medical expenses. These stark numbers kept me awake at night as I pondered how I could secure a future where my later years wouldn't be marked by loneliness or financial burden. Then, during one of those days when I was desperately searching for solutions, An unexpected moving event broke the monotonous rhythm of my life and sparked a new idea. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and I was taking my usual walk downstairs, enjoying the warm sunlight on my skin and the cheerful sounds of children playing nearby, along with the enthusiastic shouts of vendors at the market. Lost in thought, I suddenly noticed a moving truck slowly pulling up in front of my building. The truck was loaded with various pieces of furniture and boxes, and several workers were busy unloading. A woman in her 30s with a gentle face was directing the workers while holding the hand of a little girl who looked about 4 or 5 years old. As I watched, a question arose in my mind. Were they really moving into our building? I recalled that the couple who lived across the hall, both in their 60s, had always exchanged a few words with me on occasion. Now, it seemed they had suddenly moved out. What had happened to them? Gathering my courage, I approached and asked, "Are you planning to move into this building?" The young woman paused briefly, then smiled and nodded, explaining that she had just bought the apartment and would be moving in soon. Curious, I followed up, "Then what about the couple across the hall? Where have they gone?" After a moment's hesitation, she replied in a gentle voice, "Their son works out of town, so they decided to move in with him to enjoy their retirement." Her answer filled me with mixed emotions. After all, that couple had been a familiar presence in my life. Although we did not speak often, we would exchange pleasantries when we met, and the thought of their departure brought a sense of melancholy and loss. Just as I was processing this sudden change, the evening arrived with a sharp knock at my door that interrupted my dinner preparations. When I opened the door, I saw the young lady from earlier again, but this time her expression had completely changed. Her face was pale, her forehead was covered in cold sweat, and she clutched the child while her voice trembled as she said, "Auntie, my stomach hurts so much. I need to go to the hospital immediately." In that moment, my heart pounded. Seeing her frail condition, I immediately invited her and the child into my home, helped her to sit in the living room, and quickly dialed the emergency services. Within minutes, the sound of the ambulance's siren cut through the night as paramedics arrived, lifted her onto a stretcher, and rushed her to the emergency room. At the hospital, the doctor promptly examined her and diagnosed her with acute appendicitis. Immediate surgery was necessary. If her appendix were to rupture, the consequences would be severe. Although the word surgery made me anxious, I couldn't bear to see her frail body and the terrified look in the little boy's eyes. I resolutely said, "Leave the money issue to me. Please arrange the surgery immediately." The procedure went smoothly, and after 2 hours, the doctor emerged to announce that the surgery had been successful. Her condition was now under control, and she only needed a few days of observation in the hospital. At that moment, I finally felt a great sense of relief. In the days that followed, I stayed by her side almost constantly. Although life in the hospital was intense, watching the little boy greet me every day with a cheerful grandma filled me with indescribable warmth. His bright, youthful voice seemed capable of melting away all my fatigue. The young woman, though still weak, began to show tears of gratitude in her eyes as she witnessed my patient care. She shared with me the hardships she had faced. Her husband had long since left her, leaving her solely responsible for raising her child and paying the mortgage, a burden that often left her gasping for breath. Now, having met a kind-hearted elder like me who was willing to help in her time of crisis, she finally saw a glimmer of hope amid her despair. During our long hours together, we spoke about everything, from our troubled marriages to our current predicaments, and even our hopes and resignations for the future. Gradually, I discovered that although our circumstances were vastly different, we resonated with each other in unexpected ways. Looking into her eyes, which were both strong and weary, a bold idea took root in my mind. Why not invite her to live with me? After all, my solitary life, though stable, often felt lonely, and she, struggling with a heavy mortgage while raising her child alone, could benefit from mutual support. One day, during a casual conversation, I summoned the courage to say, "I've always felt that living alone is too lonely. If you're willing, why not move in with me? You could rent out your current place, which would greatly ease your mortgage burden, and I would have a companion with whom I could share life. At first, she hesitated, worried that her child and work might disrupt my routine. However, after I explained patiently, she gradually realized that this arrangement would not only relieve her financial pressure, but also bring warmth and vitality into both of our lives. After some discussion, she finally agreed to my proposal. Consequently, she rented out her previous home and moved into my familiar old house with her child. From that day on, my life underwent a dramatic transformation. The once silent and empty home was instantly filled with laughter and the lively bustle of daily life. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, I could hear the clatter of chopping and sizzling in the kitchen, along with the aroma of freshly cooked meals wafting throughout the house. She cooked a variety of delicious, nutritious home-style dishes every day, and when the little boy came home from school, he would run over to call out "Grandma" in his innocent voice, a sound that seemed to dissolve all my weariness. The house, kept neat and tidy by her careful attention, now radiated warmth and the true essence of home. The once desolate space had transformed into a vibrant little world, and for an elderly person who had long lived alone, it brought an unprecedented sense of familial affection. Day by day, our companionship grew more harmonious. Although she was busy with work and still burdened by her mortgage during the day, she always returned on time after work. Whether it was cooking or tidying up, she would always find time to sit with me and chat, listening to my stories from the past. Occasionally, she shared with me her own experiences of struggle and the bittersweet moments of her youth, and I realized that true bonds are not solely built on blood relations. Genuine care and mutual support are what truly matter. Our relationship evolved from simple mutual assistance into a deep emotional dependence, as if we had become each other's most solid support in our later years. Sometimes, as I sit by the window gazing at the night outside, I reflect on my past hardships and the transformation that has taken place. I can hardly believe how unpredictable fate can be. There was a time when I thought my future would be spent quietly with loneliness. But now, thanks to an unexpected turn of events, I have found a family member who truly accompanies me. Watching her busy figure and the innocent smile of the little boy, I have come to understand that there is more to elder care than relying solely on one's children, moving into a nursing home, or hiring an expensive caregiver. When you find someone who is genuinely willing to support you, regardless of differences in status, you can together create a warm and realistic chapter of life. As life gradually settled into a stable rhythm, I began to think about the future. After all, the house I have painstakingly accumulated over the years, along with my modest savings, is my most important support in old age. After careful consideration, I decided to visit a notary to draft a will. I would gift this house to her without any charge. In doing so, no matter what happens in the future, she will have less financial pressure, and I can turn this bond into an everlasting promise. I still remember the moment I signed at the notary. It was filled with mixed emotions, a blend of nostalgia for my lonely past, and immense hope for the future we would share. Overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude, she repeatedly thanked me and promised to take care of me wholeheartedly until the end of my long life. Now, I live with her and the delightful little boy, and every day at home is filled with laughter and warmth. In the mornings, the kitchen fills with steam from fresh cooking. In the afternoons, sunlight spills across the spotless floor, and in the evenings, the little boy plays in the yard. All of these moments make me feel that my later years have never been so rich and colorful. Compared to the days when I had to face life's hardships alone, I now have someone to lean on, and the endless loneliness and fear have been replaced by companionship. Someone cooks for me, cleans the house, chats with me, and even provides timely help when my health falters. This supportive way of living allows me to maintain the independence and freedom I have enjoyed for years, while also experiencing the caring presence of a loved one. Whenever I sit on the sofa watching television or share a pot of tea with her, the loneliness I once felt has completely vanished. Life has become so genuine and beautiful. Every detail now resembles a heartwarming picture. Occasionally, she shares her own worries about the burden of her mortgage, and I gently pat her hand and say, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out together." This mutual support and comforting reassurance make me realize that even as we age, loneliness is not inevitable. Recalling those days when a sudden downer in her health plunged us into despair, I often marvel at life's twists and turns. I vividly remember the night I saw her cradling her child as she was rushed to the hospital. Such helplessness and despair left a lasting impression on me. Later, during our time in the hospital, watching the little boy cling to me in fear only strengthened my resolve to change our lonely situation. In that moment, I truly understood that the most precious thing in life is the sincere care and support we share with one another. That unexpected encounter showed me a new model of elder care, one in which, as long as love abounds, people from different walks of life can become the warmest presence in each other's lives. Every morning, when I wake up to see the first light of dawn outside my window, I feel a renewed sense of hope for the future. People say that life is full of unexpected surprises, and my life now certainly proves that. I once believed my old age would be spent counting lonely days as time slipped away. But now, thanks to a brave decision and a heartwarming encounter, my life is filled with hope and vitality. Together, me, her, and the little boy have built a small, loving family. Our home not only shelters us from the storms of life, but also gives our lives meaning through shared companionship. Some might say that this way of living is unconventional, not the traditional model of relying on one's children. Yet I have always believed that true family ties are not solely based on blood relations, but are forged through genuine care and mutual support. As long as both parties are willing to put an honest effort, even with significant differences in age or background, an enviable bond can be created. Every time I see her busy figure or hear the pure laughter of the little boy, I remind myself that this is the elder care life I desire. Free yet warm, independent yet never alone. I have since finalized my will, gifting the house that holds a lifetime of my hard work to her without any charge. This decision is not only a summary of my many years living alone, but also an expression of gratitude for all the care she has given me. I firmly believe that no matter what storms life may bring, we will support each other through every sunrise and sunset.